use the context API inside our Next.js app. So let's close this first, and let's create a context folder. And inside this context folder, I can create any tsx file. For now, let's create a user.tsx, user.tsx, which I can share between all the components. So I can use this tsx file. And inside this tsx file, let's create a context const app context equals create context from React, and let's give undefined, and let's save this. And below we can create a provider function, export default and function, and let's say this provider, and let's create a bracket, and inside this we can create children, and let's give children, and react node, and save it. And let's come here, and let's define a constant const name and set name. These properties we can share between all the components. Set name equals let's use this state from React, and let's give initial name of Zach, and let's set this to string, and now let's close this. You can see we have set this element. Now we need to share this element inside other components, like in the app client component. Now in order to do that, first we need to return app context dot provider, like this. You can see we can provide this, and it is giving us an error. So inside this provider we need to specify the value that we can pass, and its name, give a two bracket, and it is name and set name. You can see we have specified the values that we can pass. Now we can specify children, like this, children. Now we can wrap the provider inside any element. So when we wrap this provider inside any element, it is children. We can share these elements inside the children element of this provider. Now let's save it. Now it is giving us an error because we have assigned the context to undefined, but set name is another state. Let's see that. You can see it is dispatch set state action string. So to solve this problem, we need to create an interface. In this part, let's create an interface context value, and let's give a name of string because our name is a string, and let's give a set name of this value. I think it is this value, yeah. Set name this value, Control C, and let's paste here, but we can import this using react.dispatch and react.set action. Now it is still private, but now inside this create value we can define the value, so we can wrap this like this, and we can give a context value or undefined. Now you can see we can wrap this element inside any element, and we can pass this name and set name. Now let's wrap this inside our layout element. So go to the layout element, and inside the layout element you can wrap the provider inside this children. So come here and let's create provider, not like this, provider, which we can import from here, and let's cut this and paste this like this, and let's save it. Now we have wrapped all the elements inside this provider element, but it is giving us some error because we are using server component. I use create context inside server component, so we need to convert this to use client like this. Now I think it is not giving us an error. Yeah, so now we can pass all the elements inside these elements. Now let's create a client. Let's pass to the client element. We need to pass the name and set name inside this client element. So in order to pass it, let's go here inside below the joke. Let's define another element, and let's pass name and set name equals use context of app context. I think it is not like this. Yeah, instead of doing this, we need to pass this inside a custom hook, because it is error prone. It will give us some error when we pass to another element, even though if I can use, let's say if I have logo element, and inside this logo element if I use context, it will not throw error because we don't properly handle the error. So in order to solve this, we need to create a custom hook, and we need to wrap custom hook inside this element. So let's create a custom hook inside user.tsx. So inside this user.tsx we can create a function, export function, which is you can create a separate function, a separate folder for this, but for now I will not do that. So I will create a function and use app context, and inside this function we can define const context equals use context from React, and inside this use context you can pass app context like this. Now we can check if the context is accessed outside of our provider or not. So in order to check that, if context equals undefined, we can throw an error. Now if we try to access our provider outside of our context, outside of the provider, it will throw an error which says, let's throw error, throw new error, and let's say use context is not found. Otherwise we will return the context. Now you can see we can use up context hook inside the page element instead of using use context like this, like the previous one. We can use up context directly inside our component. So inside this page element we can come here, const, let's define name and set name equals use app context from app.user. I think it is like this. You can see we can now pass name and set name to this component. Now inside this let's render h1 and let's give a name to this, and let's create a button, and inside this button let's render set name, let's set it to set name, and let's create on click element, and inside this on click element we can render a function which with set name equals update Zach, and save it. Now let's come here and let's check it. Let's go to client, you can see it will render the Zach, but now if I click this it will render updated Zach, so it is working fine. You can see first we define our context, we wrap our context with a custom hook, and we can share this custom hook inside all the components using a provider. If we try to access a provider outside, if we try to access a context outside of the provider, like if you try to access with login component, and inside this login component if we try to access the provider or the context element, we'll throw an error, user context not found. Now we have handled the error. Now inside these children we can access the provider like this. We can destructure the name and set name, and we can access the custom hook, and we can use all the elements inside the custom context. So now you can see it is easier to share data between central component to other components. So this is how you use context element inside Next.js. So let's go to the next section.